Sometimes life takes everything from you in a single moment. For Eleanor Ellie Reynolds, that moment came when she discovered the divorce papers on the kitchen table, alongside Robert's hastily scrawled note, "I can't live in your shadow anymore." Rain pelted the broken windows of the abandoned house in rural Montana as Ellie stood in what once might have been called a living room. The floorboards creaked beneath her boots, some soft with rot, others missing entirely. Through holes in the roof, she could see patches of gray sky threatening more rain. Her golden retriever, Molly, sat patiently by the doorway, those intelligent brown eyes somehow understanding everything. Molly didn't judge. Molly didn't leave. That was more than Ellie could say about most things in her life lately. She ran her hand along the wall, feeling the rough, splintered wood beneath her calloused palm. The structure leaned slightly to the left, as if the whole building was tired and ready to surrender. She understood that feeling all too well. 3 weeks ago, Robert had loaded his sedan with everything that mattered to him, which apparently didn't include her, and driven away from their life together. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of building a life, raising 2 children, of Ellie working her fingers to the bone as an architect to provide for them, and it had ended on a Tuesday afternoon in September, with him telling her he couldn't do this anymore. The leather tool belt hung from a nail Ellie had driven into one of the sturdier wall studs. It had been her father's. The leather was cracked and worn soft from decades of use. The pockets still holding the shape of the tools Thomas Reynolds had carried every day. Ellie reached for it, running her thumb over the initials carved into the back. T.R. Her father had died when Ellie was 19, but he'd left behind more than memories. He'd left skills, lessons hammered in through years of working side by side. Measure twice, cut once, had been his constant refrain. Take your time. Do it right. A person's work is their signature on the world. Before I continue this story of renewal, I'd love to know where you're listening from today. Drop a comment below, and if Ellie's situation resonates with you, make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I have something extra special for you. Ellie strapped the belt around her waist. It settled there like an old friend, familiar and solid. When Robert left, when everything fell apart, she'd found this belt in a box in the garage. Putting it on felt like reconnecting with something she'd lost. Not just her father, but some earlier version of herself, a version that knew how to build things. The shack sat on 2 acres of overgrown land, about 3 miles outside Pinewood Valley, Montana. Population 847. It had belonged to her mother's aunt, a woman Ellie had met maybe twice. When the old woman died 2 years ago, the property had passed through relatives before landing in Ellie's lap. At the time, she'd considered it worthless. Now it was all she had. The first night had been the hardest. No electricity, no running water, no heat except what little warmth Molly provided, curled up next to her on the bare floor. Ellie had lain awake most of that night, listening to the wind howl through the broken windows, feeling the cold seep up through the floorboards. She'd stared at the holes in the roof and thought about how easy it would be to just walk away. But where would she go? Back to the house she'd designed for Robert. He'd made it clear he wanted her gone. Forward to what? Another town? Another failure? No, something in her had hardened that first night. Something stubborn and maybe a little bit angry. The shack was broken. So was she. Maybe they deserved each other. And maybe, just maybe, if she could fix one, she could fix the other. A memory came to her, sharp and clear. Saturday morning, 5 years ago. Abigail had been 7 years old, gap-toothed and fearless. Ellie had given her a small hammer and let her practice driving nails into a scrap piece of pine. Like this, "Mommy," she'd asked, her tongue poking out the corner of her mouth in concentration. "Just like that, sweetheart. You're a natural." She'd worked on that piece of wood for an hour, driving nail after crooked nail. When she was done, she'd presented it to Ellie like it was a work of art. "It's a sign," she'd announced proudly, "for your office." Ellie had taken it from her small hands, examining the cluster of bent nails and the word she'd painted in wobbly letters. Mom. It's perfect, Ellie had told her. I'll hang it right over my desk. That sign was probably still hanging in the home office of the house she no longer lived in. Another thing Robert had kept. Another piece of her life that belonged to someone else now. Ellie shook her head, pushing the memory away. Dwelling on what was lost didn't rebuild walls or fix roofs. She had work to do. Her neighbor appeared on the third day. Ellie was outside prying rotten boards off the porch when she heard footsteps crunching across the gravel drive. She looked up to see an elderly woman making her way toward her, a thermos in one hand and a cane in the other. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that were sharp despite her age. "You must be Catherine's great niece," she called out. "That's right," Ellie straightened up. "Eleanor Reynolds." "Ellie. Martha Whitaker. I live just over that rise." She pointed with her cane toward the east. "Saw your truck a few days ago. Figured I'd come introduce myself." She offered the thermos. "Chicken soup. Made it this morning. You look like you could use a hot meal." Ellie took it, surprised. "Thank you. That's kind of you." "Kindness has nothing to do with it," Martha said, her eyes scanning the shack. "Can't have you starving to death out here. Bad for property values." There was humor in her voice that made Ellie smile for the first time in weeks. "I'll do my best not to die on you." "Good woman," she studied Ellie. "You planning to fix this place up?" "Planning to try. Big job for one person. It's what I've got." Martha was quiet for a moment. "My late husband Charles built our house with his own hands. Took him 2 years. Everyone said he was crazy, but he was stubborn. Said a person ought to know every board in their house, every nail. Said that's how you make it a home." Ellie felt something tighten in her chest. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was a fool mostly," Martha said, but her voice was soft. "But he was my fool. Been gone 20 years this December." She paused. "House is still standing, though." She turned to leave, then paused. "You need anything, you come knock on my door. I don't have much, but I've got tools his friends left when he died. Might be of use to you." "I appreciate that." "Don't appreciate it. Just come get them if you need them." She started walking away, then called back. "And bring that thermos back when you're done. It belonged to my husband. It's one of the things I kept." 3 weeks had passed since that first night on the bare floor. The shack was beginning to show signs of improvement. She'd patched the worst holes in the roof with salvaged plywood and tar paper. The front porch no longer threatened to collapse under her weight. Inside, she'd cleared out years of debris and torn down the water-damaged drywall, exposing the studs beneath. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Small victories that kept her moving forward. She was replacing a rotten window frame when she heard the mail truck rumble down the gravel drive. The postal worker, a young man with a red beard, handed her a stack of mail through the window. Most of it was junk, advertisements, credit card offers addressed to her great-aunt. But there beneath the pile was a large manila envelope, official-looking, her name typed neatly on the front. The return address was from a law office in town. Ellie's stomach dropped. She knew what this was before she opened it. She walked back to the porch and sat down on the steps. Molly came over and pressed against her leg, sensing something was wrong. Divorce decree, final and official. The words blurred together as she tried to read them. Dissolution of marriage, division of assets, custody arrangements. She flipped through the pages, her chest growing tighter with each one. The house, their house, the one she designed, went to Robert. The savings account split down the middle. The children would live with him. She'd get them every other weekend and rotating holidays, provided she could maintain a suitable living environment. Ellie looked up at the shack behind her. Suitable living environment. She almost laughed. There was no way this place qualified. No way a judge would let her children stay here, not in its current condition. The memory hit her like a physical blow. That Tuesday afternoon in September, she'd come home from a job site tired and covered in dust. Robert had been sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded in front of him. The children were at school. He'd planned it that way. "We need to talk," he'd said. "I can't do this anymore, Ellie." "Do what?" "This. Us. Watch you work yourself to death trying to keep your reputation afloat while we sink anyway. Your firm is struggling. We're drowning in debt and you won't talk about it. You won't let me help. You just keep designing, keep working, hoping it'll somehow get better. I'm doing my best. I know you are, but your best isn't enough anymore." He'd paused and she'd seen tears in his eyes. "I need stability. The kids need stability." He hadn't mentioned Jennifer then, the woman from his office. Ellie had found out later, piecing together the clues, the late nights, the text messages she wasn't supposed to see. She'd stared at that folder for a long time. Then she'd stood up and walked out. When she'd come back 3 hours later, his car was gone. So were most of his clothes. He'd left a note on the counter. "I'll come back for the rest tomorrow. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." As if there was an easy way to dismantle 15 years of marriage. Ellie set the divorce papers down on the porch and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. Her son Michael had been so angry, 16 years old and convinced his mother was the villain in all of this. "You're just going to let him leave? You're not even going to fight for us?" Michael had shouted when Ellie had tried to explain. "It's not that simple, honey. It is that simple. You always choose work over us. Always. And now Dad's leaving, and you don't even care." Ellie had tried to reach for him, but Michael had jerked away. "I don't want to see you. Just stay away." Abigail had been quieter about it, 12 years old and trying to understand why her family was breaking apart. She'd cried into Ellie's shoulder the day Ellie had moved her things out. "Why can't you just come with us?" she'd whispered. "It's complicated, sweetheart." That's what grown-ups always say when they don't want to explain. She was right, of course. Ellie hadn't known how to explain that Robert didn't want her anymore, that Ellie had failed at the one thing she'd promised to do, keep their family together. 2 months had passed since the divorce papers arrived. The shack was slowly transforming. The new roof was nearly complete. Proper shingles now, not just tar, paper, and prayers. All the windows had been replaced. The porch stood solid and level. To supplement her dwindling savings, Ellie had started taking on remote architectural consulting jobs. Nothing big, designing kitchen renovations, drafting plans for small additions, but enough to keep her afloat and buy the materials she needed. She'd set up a small drafting table by the window where she could work on her laptop when the sun was brightest. The hardware store in Pinewood Valley became her second home. George Sullivan, the owner, was a bear of a man in his 60s with white hair and hands like catcher's mitts. He'd watched Ellie come in week after week, always buying the bare minimum, always counting her money twice before approaching the register. One afternoon, after Ellie had spent 20 minutes deciding between two different grades of sandpaper based on which cost less, George called her over to the counter. "You're working on the old Patterson place, aren't you?" "That's right. Heard you're doing it alone. No crew, no help." George nodded slowly, then reached under the counter and pulled out a ledger. He flipped it open and slid it across to Ellie. "Here's what I'm going to do. You take what you need. Pay me when you can. No interest, no timeline. We'll keep track here." Ellie stared at the ledger. "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking, I'm offering." George leaned against the counter. "I remember your father, Thomas Reynolds. He did work on my house back in the day. Good man, honest worker. Figure I owe him this much." Ellie felt her throat tighten. "I appreciate that more than you know." "Then show me by finishing that house. Make it something your father would be proud of." From that day on, Ellie had access to the materials she needed. She kept careful track of every purchase, every dollar owed. Winter was approaching fast. Ellie could feel it in the air, see it in the way the light changed earlier each evening. She needed to finish weatherproofing before the first serious snow. One afternoon, heavy gray clouds rolled in from the west. Rain was coming. Ellie hurried to secure the last section of roofing, racing against the weather. Molly watched from the porch, ears alert. The first drops hit just as Ellie hammered in the final nail. Then the sky opened up. Rain came down in sheets, drumming against the new roof. Ellie climbed down the ladder and stood in the driveway, letting herself get soaked, watching the water run off the shingles in clean streams. No leaks, not one. Have you ever accomplished something with your own two hands that filled you with this kind of satisfaction? Tell me about it in the comments. And if you're enjoying Ellie's journey of rebuilding, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. Ellie laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. Then she ran inside and stood in the center of what would be the living room, listening. Rain pounded the roof overhead, but inside it was dry. The sound was different now. Not wind whistling through gaps or water dripping into buckets. Just the steady, solid sound of rain hitting a proper roof. We did it, girl. The house is weatherproof. That night she sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, the rain still falling, the house dry and solid behind her. So much left to do, but the foundation was there. The bones were good. The rest was just details. The call came on a Thursday morning in late October. Ellie was measuring boards for interior framing when her phone buzzed. Robert's name on the screen. Her heart jumped. He rarely called unless something was wrong. Hello? Ellie, it's about Abigail's birthday. Robert's voice was businesslike, carefully neutral. She wants to see you. I thought maybe you could come by Saturday afternoon, just for a couple hours. Ellie set down her tape measure, hands suddenly unsteady. Yeah, of course, I'd love that. 2:00. Don't be late. A pause. And Ellie, Michael will be there. I can't promise he'll be civil. I understand. A visit. An actual visit. Abigail wanted to see her. The thought filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had 2 days to prepare. 2 days to find a gift with money she didn't have. That afternoon, Ellie drove into town. She had $37 in her wallet, money she'd been saving for insulation. It would have to be enough. She walked through the aisles of the general store, picking up and putting down items, trying to find something that said, I love you and I'm sorry, without actually saying it. She finally settled on a journal, the nice kind, with a leather cover and thick cream-colored pages. Abigail had always liked to draw. Inside, Ellie tucked a new set of colored pencils. It wasn't much, but it was thoughtful. It was something her daughter could use. Saturday arrived cold and gray. Ellie pulled into the parking lot of Robert's apartment complex at exactly 2:00. The apartment was in a newer building on the edge of town. Nice place. Safe. Everything Ellie couldn't provide right now. Robert opened the door. He looked good, rested, healthier than he'd been in years. The stress lines around his eyes had softened. Come in, he said, stepping aside. The apartment was small but well furnished. Ellie's eyes immediately went to the coat rack by the door. A woman's jacket hung there. Burgundy, expensive looking. Robert followed her gaze. That's Jennifer's. She's not here today. I thought it would be easier. Jennifer, so that was her name. Seeing evidence of her here in this space where her children now lived made it real. Mom! Abigail came running from the hallway and crashed into her. Ellie caught her, wrapped her arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. She'd grown since Ellie had last seen her. Taller, older. How had she missed so much in just a few months? Hey, sweetheart. Happy birthday. Michael appeared in the doorway to what must have been his room. Her son stood there with his arms crossed, face carefully blank. But his eyes held nothing but cold distance. Michael, Ellie said. Mom. The word was flat, obligatory. They gathered around the small dining table. Robert brought out a homemade cake with 14 candles. One for good luck, he explained. They sang happy birthday, Ellie's voice catching on every other word. Abigail blew out the candles, her face lit with genuine happiness. For a moment, it almost felt normal, like a real family. Then Ellie handed Abigail her gift, a journal with a leather cover and new colored pencils. When she saw them, her face lit up. "Mom, this is perfect. I've been wanting to start drawing again. I remembered how much you used to love it." Finally, Ellie couldn't stand it anymore. "Michael, can we talk? Just for a minute?" Her son's jaw tightened. "Nothing to talk about." "Please." Robert touched Michael's arm. "It's okay. Go ahead." Michael stood and walked out onto the small balcony. Ellie followed, closing the sliding glass door behind them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They stood side by side, looking out over the parking lot. "The house is coming along," Ellie said finally. "I finished the roof last month. All the windows are in. I've been thinking maybe you could come see it sometime. I don't want to learn carpentry from you." The words hit like a fist to the chest. "Michael, you chose that shack over us." Michael's voice shook with anger. "Dad needed you. We needed you. But you couldn't handle that things weren't perfect, so you just left." "That's not what happened." "Then what happened? Because from where I'm standing, you gave up. Dad tried to make it work. He got a new job. He tried to fix things, but you just walked away." "I didn't give up on you," Ellie said quietly. "I gave up on myself. There's a difference." "Not to us, there isn't." Michael started to go back inside, then stopped. He pulled something from his pocket, a small piece of wood with crooked nails hammered into it. The sign Abigail had made years ago, the one that said, "Mom." "Abby found this in the garage." Michael's voice was softer now. "She said you might need it more than we do now." He pressed it into Ellie's hand and went inside. Ellie stood alone on the balcony, staring at the crude sign her daughter had made when she was 7, and now she was giving it back to Ellie. It was Tuesday afternoon when Ellie received the certified letter. She'd been in the middle of installing crown molding in the living room when the mail truck's familiar rumble drew her outside. Underneath the usual stack was a large envelope, certified mail from a law office in Denver, Colorado. Ellie's hands went cold despite her gloves. Denver. Why would a law office in Denver be sending her certified mail? She tore it open and pulled out the papers inside. The first page made her vision blur. Legal letterhead. Parental notification of relocation. She forced herself to read. Robert had accepted a job offer in Denver. Senior position at a real estate development firm. Substantial salary increase. He would be relocating in 6 weeks, taking the children with him. The custody arrangement would remain legally unchanged. She would still have visitation rights on alternate weekends and holidays. But the practical reality was clear. Denver was over 8 hours away. 8 hours. She couldn't drop by for a birthday. Couldn't take Abigail out for ice cream on a random Tuesday. Weekend visits would mean 16 hours of driving or expensive plane tickets she couldn't afford. The children she was trying so hard to rebuild relationships with were about to become effectively unreachable. What was the point? What was the point of any of this? She'd built this house to prove she could finish something, to prove she wasn't the failure they thought she was, to create a home her children could return to, but they wouldn't be returning. They'd be in Colorado, building a new life without her. Ellie walked to the living room and sat down heavily on the couch. Molly followed, resting her head on Ellie's knee. Her phone rang. "Robert, you got the papers," he said. Not a question. "Yeah." "I know it's not ideal." "Not ideal?" Ellie's voice came out harder than she intended. "Robert, they'll be 8 hours away. How am I supposed to be their mother from 8 hours away? This is a good opportunity for us, for the kids. Better schools, better opportunities. I can finally provide for them the way they deserve." The way they deserve. The implication was clear, the way Ellie never could. After he hung up, Ellie sat in the silence of her beautiful house and felt the weight of it all crushing down. She'd worked so hard. Put everything she had into making it something her children would want to come back to. And for what? That night, Ellie didn't work on the house. She just sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, Molly beside her, staring out at the darkness. Days passed in a fog. She stopped working. stopped answering Martha when she knocked on the door. She just existed, moving through the house like a ghost, questioning every decision that had led her here. On the fourth day, Martha let herself in. She found Ellie sitting at the kitchen table, the unopened letter in front of her. "Eleanor Reynolds, you look like death warmed over." Ellie didn't respond. Martha sat down across from her, uninvited. "What's happened?" Ellie pushed the letter toward her. Martha read it slowly, her expression unchanging. When she finished, she set it down and looked at Ellie directly. "So, they're moving, and you've decided to give up." "What's the point, Martha?" Ellie's voice cracked. "I built this whole house thinking they'd come back, that I could show them I'm not a failure. But they're leaving anyway." Martha leaned forward, her eyes sharp and clear. "Let me ask you something. When you designed houses for other people, did you think about the structure or just about who would live there?" "Both," Ellie replied. "But the structure comes first. Without solid bones, the rest doesn't matter." "Exactly," Martha tapped the table with one finger. "You didn't build this house for your children to live in. You built it to show them who you are, to show yourself who you are." "When Charles died," she continued, "I thought about selling our house, moving into town, being closer to people." She reached across the table and gripped Ellie's hand. "But you know what I realized? That house wasn't about Charles being there. It was about what Charles had been, what he'd accomplished, what he'd proved to himself and to me." Pause for interaction. 3. Have you ever realized that something you were building wasn't just about its practical purpose, but about proving something to yourself? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you're finding value in Ellie's journey, please hit subscribe to join our community of resilient souls. This house, Martha gestured around them, isn't just about giving your kids a place to visit. It's about proving to yourself that you can take something broken and make it whole. That you can commit to something and follow through no matter how hard it gets. She squeezed Ellie's hand harder. "You think they'll respect you more if you give up now? If you let this house sit unfinished because they're moving away? Or will they respect you more if you finish what you started, regardless of what they do?" Ellie looked at her. This woman who'd become more than a neighbor, who'd brought her soup and tools and wisdom when she needed all three. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted quietly. "Yes, you can. You've been doing it all along." Martha stood up, still holding Ellie's hand. "Now get up, pick up your hammer, and finish what you started. Not for them, for you." After Martha left, Ellie sat alone at the table for a long time. She thought about giving up, really thought about it. Walking away from the house, from Pinewood Valley, from all of it. But then she looked around at what she'd built. The solid walls, the level floors, the kitchen that had gone from nothing to this. She'd done all of that. Not Robert, not her children, not anyone else. Her. Maybe Martha was right. Maybe she hadn't built this house for her children to live in. Maybe she'd built it to prove she could still build something when everything else had fallen apart. To prove that broken things, including herself, could be made whole again with enough work and determination. Ellie picked up her hammer from where it had been sitting untouched for 4 days. She had 6 weeks until they left. 6 weeks to finish this house completely. To make it so beautiful, so solid, that her children would know, even from Colorado, that their mother had built something worth remembering. Not for them to come back to, but for her to be proud of. 5 weeks. That's all the time Ellie had left. 5 weeks to complete the transformation from broken shack to something remarkable. She worked like a woman possessed. Up before dawn, working past midnight most nights. The final details came together with a precision that bordered on obsessive. Crown molding in every room, installed with perfect mitered corners. Baseboards cut and fitted so tightly you couldn't slide paper between them and the wall. She built a stone surround for the fireplace using river rocks she'd collected from the creek that ran through the back of the property. In Abigail's room, she built a window seat with storage underneath, painted the trim bright white to contrast with the blue walls. The community had noticed the transformation. People drove out from town just to see what she'd done. Word spread through Pinewood Valley. The broken shack on the edge of town had become something special. One afternoon, a reporter from the local paper showed up, a young woman with a camera and a notepad, asking if she could do a story about the house. "From what I hear, this is quite a transformation," she said. "People are calling it a miracle." "I needed to prove I could finish something," Ellie told her honestly. "That's all." The story ran a week later. From ruin to remarkable, local woman transforms abandoned shack into beautiful home. With 3 weeks remaining, Ellie began working on the exterior. She built a small deck off the back, extending the living space and creating a place to sit and watch the mountains. She prepared the ground where a garden would go come spring. Turned the soil, marked out beds, planned what she'd grow. Tomatoes, maybe green beans. Abigail liked snap peas. She'd plant those for sure. 2 weeks before the move, Ellie carved a wooden sign. She'd been thinking about it for days, sketching designs, considering what words mattered most. In the end, she kept it simple. Home. Just that one word carved into a piece of oak. Letters carefully shaped and sanded smooth. She hung it above the front door with brass screws, making sure it was level. Stepped back to look at it. That's what this place was now. Not a shack, not a project. Home. 3 days before the move, Ellie called Robert. "I'd like to have the kids over one more time before you leave. Both of them, please." He was quiet for a moment. "Michael won't want to come." "Ask him anyway. Tell him," Ellie paused, searching for the right words. "Tell him his mother finished what she started, and she'd like them to see it. I'll ask. No promises. That's all I can ask for." The morning they were supposed to arrive, Ellie woke early, fed Molly, made coffee, stood on the front porch, and watched the sun rise over the mountains. The house stood solid behind her. Beautiful, complete. Whatever happened today, she'd finished what she started, and that meant something. That meant everything. The car pulled into the driveway at exactly 2 o'clock. Robert was driving. She could see 2 figures in the back seat. Both of them had come. The car stopped. Doors opened. Abigail got out first, already smiling. Then Michael emerged, moving slowly, reluctantly, his arms crossed over his chest. But he was here. That was something. "Mom!" Abigail ran up the walkway and hugged her. "The house looks amazing from the outside." Ellie held her close, then looked past her to where Michael stood at the bottom of the steps. "Hey, Michael." "Mom." The word was flat, non-committal, but he'd said it. "Thanks for coming, both of you." Ellie gestured toward the door. "Want to see what I've been working on?" Ellie opened the door and stepped aside, letting them enter first. The reaction was immediate. Abigail gasped. Even Michael stopped in his tracks, his expression cracking just slightly. The living room glowed in the afternoon light streaming through the new windows. The fireplace with its river-stone surround dominated one wall. The handmade furniture arranged perfectly. The family photograph hung above the mantel, flanked by Abigail's childhood drawing and her father's tool belt. "Mom," Abigail whispered, "you did all this?" "Every bit of it." Michael hadn't moved from the doorway. He stood rigid, jaw clenched, staring at the room like it had personally offended him. Ellie showed them the kitchen, then the bathroom, then the master bedroom. Finally, she opened the door to Abigail's room. The blue walls, the window seat with storage underneath, the shelves waiting for her books and drawings, the small desk in the corner, positioned to catch the morning light. "You built this for me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "For when you visit, whenever you want, you'll always have a place here." Michael had remained in the hallway. Ellie walked back out to find him staring at the family photograph again. "You kept it," he said. "Why wouldn't I?" "Because we're not a family anymore. Because Dad left you. Because everything fell apart." Michael's voice was rising now, all that carefully controlled emotion finally breaking through. "Because you gave up on us." "I never gave up on you." You walked away. When things got hard, you just... He gestured wildly at the house. You ran out here and built this instead of fighting for us. Is that what you think? That I chose this house over you? Didn't you? Ellie was quiet for a long moment. I didn't choose this house over you, Ellie said quietly. I chose this house because of you. Because I needed to prove I could still build something. That I wasn't just a failure. She met her son's eyes directly. The truth is, Michael, I was drowning. The architecture firm was failing. We were in debt. Your father found someone else. Her voice cracked on these last words. And I couldn't face any of it. I couldn't admit I was struggling. I was too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to change course. You should have fought for us. You're right. I should have fought differently. I should have been honest about my struggles instead of pretending everything was fine. She took a deep breath. But I'm fighting now. Not to get your father back. That's over. But to show you that people can rebuild after they've been broken. That's what this house is. It's my way of saying I'm not giving up. Not on myself and certainly not on you. Something shifted in Michael's expression. The anger was still there, but now mixed with confusion, maybe even a flicker of understanding. I miss how things used to be, he whispered. And suddenly he wasn't the angry teenager anymore. He was just her son, hurting. I know, honey, I do too. Michael's face crumpled, and suddenly he was moving toward her. Ellie caught him in her arms. Her son was crying now, deep sobs that shook his whole body. I missed you, Mom. I missed you so much. Ellie held him tight, her own tears falling freely. I missed you too, honey. Every single day. Abigail appeared in the doorway of her room, tears streaming down her face. She ran to them and Ellie wrapped one arm around her while keeping the other around Michael. Her children, her family, still broken in some ways, but maybe, just maybe, starting to heal. They stood there in the center of the living room beneath the family photograph, holding each other as late afternoon light streamed through the windows of the house Ellie had built with her own two hands. As they walked to the car, Michael stopped and turned back. Hey, Mom, can you take a picture of us in front of the house? Ellie's heart swelled. Of course. They gathered on the front porch beneath the home sign. Robert got out of the car and offered to take the photo. Ellie handed him her phone, then positioned herself between her children, one arm around each of them. The camera clicked. Got it, Robert said. He walked over and handed her the phone, then looked at the house properly for the first time. His expression softened. Ellie, you did something remarkable here. He looked genuinely impressed. The kids are lucky to have a place like this to come back to. He got back in the car, and the children climbed in after him. Ellie stood in the driveway as they pulled away, waving until the car disappeared down the road. Then she was alone again, just her and Molly in the house. She walked back inside and looked at the photo Robert had taken. The three of them on the porch, the house solid and beautiful behind them, her children smiling. Both of them, smiling with her. That evening, her phone rang, an unknown number with a Colorado area code. She answered. Mom? Michael's voice. I just wanted to... we're almost home and He paused. Thanks for today, for showing us the house, for being honest with me. Thank you for coming, for listening. I'll call you when we get to Colorado. Let you know we made it safe. I'd like that. Spring arrived in Pinewood Valley like a promise kept. The snow melted from the mountains, revealing green beneath. Wildflowers pushed through the softening earth. 6 months had passed since Robert and the children moved to Colorado. 6 months of weekly phone calls, video chats, text messages throughout the day. The distance was real, but it hadn't broken them. If anything, it had forced them to try harder, to be more intentional about staying connected. Michael would spend 2 weeks in July learning woodworking. Abigail would come for 3 weeks in August. It wasn't the same as having them nearby, but it was something. It was more than Ellie had dared hope for 6 months ago. The house had become more than just her home. It had become a gathering place. George stopped by regularly, sometimes bringing friends who wanted to see the transformation. Martha came for dinner every Thursday, a tradition they'd started in February and hadn't broken since. Ellie's remote architectural work had picked up too. Word had spread about her renovation, and local homeowners started asking her to design additions and renovations. She'd set up a proper office in the spare bedroom, balancing design work with her ongoing house projects. One afternoon in early April, a young man knocked on Ellie's door. He was maybe 25, holding a sleeping infant against his chest. He looked exhausted and desperate. "Are you Eleanor Reynolds?" the man asked. "I am. I'm Kyle. George sent me. Said you might be able to help." He gestured vaguely behind him. "I'm renting a place in town, single dad. The landlord won't fix anything, and I don't know where to start. Martha said you might teach me some basics." Ellie looked at this young man, saw herself from a year ago, overwhelmed, alone, trying to figure out how to keep going. She smiled. "Come on in. Let me grab my tools." Teaching Kyle became a regular thing. Twice a week, Ellie would drive into town and spend a few hours showing him how to patch drywall, fix a leaky faucet, replace a broken window. Simple repairs, but they made a difference. "I can't pay you much," Kyle said one afternoon. "Don't worry about it. Someone helped me when I needed it. I'm just passing it forward." In May, Ellie planted the garden she'd been planting all winter. Tomatoes, green beans, snap peas for Abigail. She worked the soil with her hands, feeling it crumble between her fingers, rich and dark and full of potential. The first shoots emerged 2 weeks later. Tiny green promises pushing toward the sun. Ellie photographed them and sent the pictures to Abigail. She responded immediately. "They're growing just like us." Ellie smiled at that. Just like us. Healing, growing, reaching toward the light. One evening in late May, Ellie sat on her deck watching the sunset. The mountains glowed pink and gold. The garden showed neat rows of thriving plants. The house stood solid behind her, beautiful and complete. Her phone buzzed. A video call from Michael. She answered immediately. "Hey, Mom, just wanted to show you something." Michael turned the camera to show a small bookshelf he'd been building in his room. "I used those techniques you taught me at Christmas. Check out these joints." Ellie examined the screen, proud of the craftsmanship. "Those are perfect, honey. I've been thinking, when I come this summer, maybe we could build something together, like a real project." "I'd love that. What did you have in mind?" "A workbench for your shop? Something we could both use when I visit." Ellie felt her eyes sting. "That sounds perfect." After they hung up, Ellie walked back inside. The evening light filled the living room, warm and golden. She stood before the mantel, looking at the photographs arranged there. The old family portrait from happier times. The new photo from their last visit. All three of them smiling on the front porch. Her father's tool belt hanging beside Abigail's childhood drawing. 3 generations connected by craft and determination and love. She walked to the window and looked out at the property she'd transformed, the house that had been broken and was now whole, the garden growing toward harvest, the mountains standing eternal in the distance. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, broken, defeated, ready to give up. Thought about the journey from there to here, every board measured and cut, every nail driven true, every moment of doubt overcome by stubborn determination. The house hadn't brought her family back together, hadn't fixed her marriage or erased her mistakes, but it had given her something more important. Proof that she could rebuild, that broken things could be made beautiful again, with patience and work and refusal to quit. "Home isn't just a place you build," she said softly to herself, the words Martha had shared with her one evening. "It's the story you create within it." Molly barked from the front door. Ellie turned to see Martha making her way up the path, a covered dish in her hands. Thursday dinner. She'd almost forgotten. She opened the door and welcomed her in, the house filled with the smell of Martha's homemade cobbler and the sound of her laughter. Ellie looked around her living room, at the furniture she'd built, The walls she'd repaired, the floors she'd refinished, at the photographs of her children, the tools of her trade, the garden visible through the window. This house, once broken and abandoned, now rang with life, with friendship, with possibility, with hope. She'd started with nothing but rusty tools and determination. She'd built shelter first, then a house, and finally, slowly, carefully, one day at a time, she'd built a home. The smoke rose from the chimney into the clear evening sky. The home sign swayed gently in the spring breeze, and inside, Eleanor Reynolds sat at her handmade table with a friend, breaking bread, telling stories, living the life she'd rebuilt from ruins. She'd found her way back, not to what was, but to what could be. And that was enough. That was everything.